Soulslikes. They're everywhere. But could you tell me what the genre actually means? Your answer would be entirely different than the person sitting behind you. Don't look behind you. There have been countless debates about it, so what makes this video different from the others? Well, good question, my extremely intelligent and inquisitive viewer. May I just say, you're looking very nice today, champ. Keep it up. Firstly, I have a history of making videos extremely similar to this one, where we discuss genres, where they come from, and how they could be better. Before that, I covered gaming news for years, where I was some degree of a gaming journalist. I'm not just some random person on the internet. I'm a massive nerd on the internet. Secondly, I've been playing Souls games since the beginning of time. They saved my life. They taught me patience, resilience, and how to love. Lastly, and most importantly, I've watched every single video talking about this subject. Kinda. Some were really well produced with some good points. Fun to watch. Others were 30 minutes of unscripted rambling with nearly zero editing and a microphone that picked up every mouth sound like an ASMR video etching into my skull. And a lot of them on both sides just didn't know how a video game genre worked, effectively making the video about nothing and wasting my time. This was the hardest thing I've done since Orphan of Cause. Let's nail it down. How did genres work? Or in other words,
what the hell was even that?
People often see them as fences that games have to be corralled into, like a Disney adult waiting in line, knee brace and all. Genres are primarily a marketing tool. They're something that we, the gamers, use to find experiences that we will enjoy based on other experiences that we've enjoyed in the past. The fences do exist, but they're only utilized when greed causes publishers to follow the trends of the industry, like when every game featured zombies or nowadays with Norse mythology. Personal space, please. These games are usually very cookie cutter with the same mechanics everywhere, like towers and open world games. Most of the time, the games people hold above all the rest and praise until the end of times aren't created by following a genre, but instead by using mechanics that the developers enjoy, which usually are established by other video games. Art is derivative, inspiration is everywhere, and everyone's stealing from each other, including myself with this video. We've addressed this. I'm stealing this. This is stolen. I watched other people's videos and was like, I could do it better, and I stole it. And now they're going to copyright strike me, and I'm going to go to prison! This is also how new genres are established. A developer creates a video game with an innovative and different idea, it becomes popular, which then causes multiple new games based on that game to be made. These are called clones. More games are then made based on the clones and not the original, and eventually the clones no longer feel like the original, and in turn, the category gets a nickname based on the few factors that remain from that original product. There are a lot of things going on in the original Doom, but what does it primarily share with Call of the Doodle 21? That's right, it's first person and it's a shooter. Good job! And so the FPS was born. Sometimes that last step doesn't happen though, which is what occurred with roguelikes. But the devs have stopped trying to tick the boxes of the original rogue. And now the term just means permadeath, with roguelite meaning semi-permadeath. A game being a roguelike isn't the only thing that defines it though. It also has a story genre, a setting, a format, and many more. None of this matters in gaming though, so you can just ignore it. You just stop looking at them. Put them in the bin. But they're useless. Nothing. Garbage. Worthless. Games are usually defined by their gameplay alone, with subgenres getting more specific. Combining two or more gameplay genres can help diversify the experience. This is known as a composite genre. Not exactly, there's more detail here, but shut up, I want to talk about Soulslikes eventually, okay? Gaming is an interactive experience, so gameplay is king, and the story is queen. It doesn't matter if you love the sci-fi setting if you don't like grand strategy games. Space isn't going to suddenly make you Sun Tzu. People often argue that genres are bad because they only see them from their ugly fence post bad side and not their sexy marketing good side. And honestly, they're right. Genres can hurt innovation and cause gaming to stagnate inside of a format for long periods. But this only really happens if the genres are too specific. It causes people to lash out at games that aren't following the rules set by the genre. This happened with roguelike. People were upset that the games weren't turn-based dungeon crawlers, but eventually, there were too many roguelikes for them to yell at. Same thing is happening with Soulslikes right now. Games, over time, become more than the sum of their parts. They break out of the shadow of their ancestors, until there's so many games that the shadow is no longer visible. All that's left is a line in a history book. A good way to forego the argument entirely is just to rely on recommendations, meaning you recommend good games to your friends, and they'll do the same back to you. You could even practice this by recommending this video to them. Some people believe we should start using tags instead, like Steam kind of already does. Once again, genres are for marketing. They're there to make it easier for us to find games, and tags could fine-tune that process even more by including aspects outside of gameplay. But it could also hurt the process by giving people too many options, especially new players. To be honest, genres kind of already have this problem to a degree, as people can't decode what genres mean immediately, like Soulslikes, for example. Remember we were talking about those? We can finally start answering the titular question, what is a Soulslike? Well, I toiled with this question for hours, tirelessly trying to figure out how we can definitively solve this problem. And I think I figured it out. I've formed a two-step plan that by the end of this video will allow us to definitively figure out what a Soulslike is, and the nickname we'll give it so that it doesn't fall into the same situation as roguelike, because that's icky. That's gross. That's gross. First, we need to figure out what the players believe the genre is, because again, gamers make the genres, not the creators. Second, we need to figure out what specific innovations that FromSoft's games offer, and what makes them so special to so many people. As we've addressed, video games are decided by gameplay, so even though a lot of people talked about all this stuff, we're just going to ignore anything that doesn't have to do directly with a gameplay mechanic. A lot of people think of the leveling system and the exploration as key attributes, but those are already genres of their own, and are in nearly every video game, so they just can't define Souls-like. Just like Dark Souls multiplayer. This is separated into two categories. Direct, meaning invasions, player summons, that kind of thing. This can't be part of the Souls-like genre because it's pretty basic PvP. If this is what defined the genre, Call of the Doodle could be a Souls-like. It could have Souls-like elements at the very least. I'm not going to let that happen. I refuse. That's not happening. No, thank you. No. Indirect, meaning bloodstains that show echoes of player deaths, and the message system that helps, hinders, or is just funny. Finger butthole. This can't be part of the equation either. Not because it isn't unique or innovative, but because it is already part of a coined genre, one formed by Hideo Kojimo's Death Stranding. Dark Souls, in all technicality, is a Strand game. The difficulty is probably the most discussed. We've all seen the memes. Crash Bandicoot is the Dark Souls of platformers.
I think we've kind of made the Dark Souls of competitive first-person shooters.
Divorce is the Dark Souls of marriage.
Divorce.
Dark Souls has gained a reputation for its difficulty. When Dark Souls launched, most games were foregoing difficulty to instead focus on storytelling and immersion. Meanwhile, Dark Souls focuses on high, but fair, difficulty. Everything does high damage, but has a low health pool. This makes it so that failure feels fixable, especially when you add on the forgiving nature of the corpse runback mechanic, where you drop your souls on death, but can get them back if you don't die again. However, difficulty also can't be a feature to define the genre, because it's subjective. Different things are harder for different players, and with practice it all just kind of becomes easy. It would just lead to the question of what hard truly is. I swear this never happens! On top of that, Dark Souls and all its predecessors can be made easier in a lot of ways. There's summons, be that NPCs or players, spirit ashes in Elden Ring, consumables that make a lot of the game easier, and lastly, everything has a weakness that can be used to your advantage, like bleed weapons in Elden Ring. There's nothing wrong with using these. It's an in-lore difficulty slider that just doesn't get explained very well. Ditching the difficulty selection isn't uncommon in gaming either. Rockstar is practically known for this, and some games even use AI to temper with difficulty as you play, like Left 4 Dead or Resident Evil 4. Difficulty could be a side effect of what what actually defines Souls-like, a common trend, but it just can't be a primary feature that we look for. The second most suggested is generally the combat. Some people go crazy wacky about this and believe it's decided on the need to manage stamina output, but nearly every game has a stamina bar, so we're gonna throw that in the suggestion bin, along with the dodge rolling, as Enter the Gungeon is not a Souls-like, okay? It's not a Souls-like. Once again, a dash is some kind of side effect, not the main thing. More based in reality is the focus on waiting to strike, or deciding to run. Not in the style of Zelda, but because of a mechanic called animation priority. This basically means that you press a button and you have to wait until the animation is finished before you can do any further action. This can be wind-ups or cooldowns. But this single feature is the reason of why Dark Souls combat feels the way that it does. It causes you to feel like you're controlling the character instead of the character filling in the blanks like they do in hack and slash games. I've only pressed 2 buttons. This is also for the enemies, as they have choreographed attacks and patterns that work in similar ways. It makes fights feel like a dance, and allows for hitbox porn. A good simple example of this kind of mechanic at work is Mario's jump in Mario Odyssey. Outside of a couple frames near the end where it will still accept a second jump, once you press the button, that's it. No jump, no double jump, no cancel, just up. You can like dive, but shut up. There are many examples of this kind of thing. Sometimes with different names, but we'll keep it simple even if it's a little bit wrong. Still, please correct me in the comments. This was a very hard thing to research. Monster Hunter's combat does the same stuff as Dark Souls, and surprise, surprise, a lot of Dark Souls players love Monster Hunter, myself included. Capcom, please work with me. Please. Dear God, give me Monster Hunter Wilds. I need it. This combat style is a really good potential direction to take the Souls-like genre. It's the primary reason why I love the game after all, and many others would agree. But it also ignores a lot of the other features in Dark Souls that make the game unique and different. Quirky. We can't base the genre entirely on what the general populace says. We can barely decide what we want to eat. Everyone is screaming different things, so it just becomes a roaring crowd of different voices. The void needs a leader. You have to base the genre on the games themselves, too. Focusing on things like the combat, the elements undeniably unique to Dark Souls, or the games that mimic its legacy. Now, I want to be clear before we dive into the endless void of information. This video is not about Dark Souls development. We're focusing specifically on the unique features of the Souls games. So while I am about to talk a lot about the history of From Software, we are intentionally ignoring some of the fluff so that we can focus on the mechanics that define the game. It's like a history lesson, but with a goal. Similar to how history books cut out the deeds of minorities to make white people seem more heroic. Our journey began over 30 years ago, when From Software launched its first video game, Kingsfield, for the PS2. It was led by none other than the famous and genius game developer, Naotoshi Zin. I hope I said that right. It was critically acclaimed, so it got many sequels and a spiritual successor named Eternal Ring. They made a few more games in this style, and others, but eventually moved on from this type of game and dedicated mostly to Armored Core. This is a good decision that we should all praise because it gave us the hit game Metal Wolf Chaos XD. And I don't want to live in a world where this game doesn't exist. Meanwhile, outside of the gaming industry, Hidetaka Miyazaki was working as a fantastic account manager, but after playing The Legend of Zelda and Ico, his third eye opened, and he realized his destiny, and pulled a funky move for a 34-year-old man in the 2000s. He left his safe career and got into game development. One of the least safe careers in existence. Well, other than construction work, I guess. And lumberjack. And drug dealer. And he worked as a game designer on Armored Core Last Raven, and must have left hell of an impression because then he directed Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer with very little experience as a game developer. Meanwhile, across the pond, Bethesda released The Elder Scrolls Oblivion as a timed exclusive to the Xbox, which won 2006's Game of the Year.
I'm gonna have sex with these guys tonight!
Sony wanted a competitor, so they hired From Software since they made Kingsfield for them in the past. Takeshi Kaji took the helm, but the project didn't manage to get anywhere. Miyazaki, still working on For Answer, glanced over and saw the project failing. His jaw dropped, and drool started pouring out as he always loved fantasy. So, he chose to direct both games at the same time. He viewed this as a safe decision as the project was already failing, so if he couldn't save it, he wouldn't be punished. Immediately, he scrapped nearly the whole project and reforged it into his vision. It was no longer viewed as a successor to Kingsfield. It was no longer viewed as a competitor to Oblivion, but rather a whole new thing. Demon Souls. They set out with the goal of giving the player a sense of accomplishment for overcoming fair challenges. This type of game was controversial for the time, so they hid this difficulty from Sony, and added the corpse run back mechanic on top of that, so that every death would have just a glimmer of hope to keep players going. They held a demo at the Tokyo Game Show, but players didn't like the game. They thought it was too slow, too hard, and clunky compared to other games of the time, because it was. But that's the animation priorities fault, which made the combat quirky. Demon Souls sold and review horribly. PlayStation president Shuhei Yoshida said the game was horrible for the same reasons players did in the demo, aka, he needed to get good. Shuhei is usually pretty based though, so we can forgive him for this misstep. Sony refused to port Demon Souls to the West, but YouTubers imported it themselves, and the game gained a cult following. Oh, to be making content back then. Atlus and Bandai Namco later ported it, and the game broke 150,000 sales in the first week, causing Sony to regret their decision. Mood change. Innovation is often born from limitation and struggle. This is why I viewed it as important that we discuss FromSoft's history in this way. So, what did Demon Souls truly accomplish? What's notable here? We've already spoken about the combat and its difficulty in the last chapter. These caused a dose of dopamine with every fight, and there's a lot of humor in it. This is also the first time the corpse run mechanic appears as well. This caused every encounter to have a glimmer of hope, which allowed them to make every boss fill the player with despair without losing the player's willpower. The message system,
invasions,
and blood spots all also appeared, and these were all systems that were carried into the future games. Demon Souls launched in February 2009 and was ported the following October, so there was a 9-month period where the game was marked as a massive failure, and Miyazaki believed he'd never work on a fantasy game ever again. Despite this, he immediately began working on a sequel, which was either him taking a massive leap of faith or making the coolest called shot ever. When Demon Souls was later marked as successful, he decided that this next game was him returning the kindness since players gave him a second chance to get it right. Sony owned the Demon Souls IP, so they couldn't make it a sequel. This was later viewed as a good thing, but at the time it was kind of disappointing. Since the game featured a race of cursed creatures, later called undead, they decided to give the game the legendary title of, you guessed it, Dark Race. Miyazaki-san, people on the translation team are saying that our game is racist. Wait, Tokyo Game Show's tomorrow? Ah, crap. The game was revealed as Project Dark as they searched for a new title. They tried Dark Lord, yeah, then Dark Ring.
Girl, that's a booty hole.
So they settled on Dark Souls. With Miyazaki having full control as both the producer and director, the story became incredibly consistent, even while allowing artists to be creative with his desires. They also didn't repeat the mistakes of Demon Souls. Healing was no longer a consumable that didn't automatically replenish, and they didn't show a demo at the Tokyo Game Show. It was not a perfect game. The second half starts to fall off with Bed of Chaos and Izalith keeping Miyazaki up at night screaming and kicking. And the fast travel hurts the overall vibe, plus poor optimization and balancing issues that have become legendary, with Blighttown being the logo for it. Still, Dark Souls was a revolutionary game that changed a lot of people's lives, including my own. This is basically my second dad. It improved on Demon Souls a lot, while adding two extremely notable things. The bonfires acted as checkpoints, just like any other game. A recovery point, a place to relax, and a place to level up. But they also had some online features like they allowed for kindling, which raises your flask limit by 5 and sends 1 extra to other players, and you could see peeps. They also respawned enemies when you sat at them. This was new to gaming and added a trade-off for resting at them. Lastly, Demon's Souls had a disconnected level-based map. Dark Souls ditched that for an interconnected open world that weaves back and forth onto itself and emphasizes exploration and player choice. We don't need to keep going from here. Most of these features are present in all of FromSoft's games going forward, but they did drop a couple of things here or there and added on a little bit more here or there. Let's get back to the titular question. What is a Souls-like? Well, what is Dark Souls? It's a third-person, mostly, action-adventure RPG with Metroidvania and roguelite elements in a historical dark fantasy, you could argue for epic, post-apocalyptic linear open world. Change dark fantasy to Eldritch Horror, you got Bloodborne. Change linear to true, drop the dark, you have Elden Ring. Drop it all, find a pile of shit, you have Dark Souls 2. Even outside of FromSoft, change historical dark fantasy to coming of age, you got Lies of P. Drop historical dark, and you have another Crab's Treasure. Change third person to 2D, drop the RPG, embrace Metroidvania, you have Hollow Knight. Some don't even require any changes, like Mortal Shell or Lords of the Fallen. I could do this all day. All of these and more are games that people say are Souls-likes, because it's become a collection of common traits rather than specific functions like literally every other genre. RPG means you have a leveling tree. Metroidvania means you backtrack and unlock new paths with new gear. Sorry, I was choking on myself. Action means you fight things. That's it, that's all. Action's pretty simple. A lot of the time, the common trait that people focus on is just the environmental storytelling. And that's not gameplay. Souls-like is undefined and unspecific. So all of these YouTubers and you say different things when trying to nail it down. And every game is labeled as a Souls-like. Let's finally shave off the fluff and figure out what the hell I've been talking about for like the last 20-something minutes. We've tied down the gameplay innovations that make up Souls games, so now let's straight up ignore the games themselves and just focus on those features. Difficulty is a biggin, but we've already talked about it in Chapter 2. Difficulty is a side effect of whatever the final genre is, not the genre itself. This is the same story for roguelikes. They're usually really hard for new players, but that's not a requirement. We've also addressed the multiplayer. Dark Souls is a part of the Strand genre put in place by Hideo Kojima. Now, obviously Death Stranding came out way after Dark Souls, but Hideo Kojima already coined the term for himself, so let's pick our battles. The interconnected map is where things start to get interesting, but in my opinion, it's just a really good and condensed open world. Just because a door is locked and then it suddenly isn't, doesn't make it special or unique. Whether or not it's a true open world or not is under debate, but you'll have to watch my other video to figure out that for yourself. Elden Ring, on the other hand, could create a new genre on its own because of its map. As you play the game, the map slowly uncovers, not showing you its actual size until you reach destinations where you then need to find a map to see details similar to a tower. This is something that is kind of borrowed from the Metroidvania games as well. We could call it something like progressive open world, and then add in true or linear prefix on top of that. So for example, Elden Ring would be a progressive true open world. It's a bit of a mouthful, I don't know. But regardless, it is a feature that I hope other open world games utilize. Because like, this might be its own video one day. I've done enough research for this video though already, so we're gonna table that. I cannot watch another YouTube video about anything in relation to Souls games for quite a while. I'm done. It's crazy, I'm done. We've also spoken about the combat already, but we've gained a little bit more information, so let's retread some ground. The games share traits with hack and slash games, with many modern hack and slash games often being called Souls-likes prematurely, just like my ejaculation. But because of its use of action priority, Souls combat is extremely unique and not even mimicked by every game that claims to be in the genre. You could argue that this is the defining point of Dark Souls. and many do include it as part of their equation, but it's kind of not what a Souls-like fully is. It's half of what it is. The reason why everyone struggles to figure out what this goddamn genre isn't because they're dummy smooth-brained babies, it's because Dark Souls has actually created two genres, not one. The first is a subgenre of action games, inertia action. Inertia means that an object will stay in motion unless interrupted by an external force, meaning you press the button, you start the motion, it can't be stopped unless interrupted by something else, aka action priority. Inertia action focuses on the weight of actions and how things react to said action. Two other inertia action games that come to mind are Monster Hunter and Dead Rising. Unfortunately, inertia action can quickly become a mouthful. We already say action adventure, so this would become inertia action adventure. It's two hyphens, that's too many. But honestly, I would argue that we drop the adventure in this equation. It doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. It is a non-word. Inertia action, admittedly, isn't what I went into this video to make. It's something that was born out of the research I did. So it's directly created from the videos that I watched to build this video. So congrats all you YouTubers. You have a baby now. Where are my child support payments? The second genre Dark Souls formed is the one that I'm a lot more confident in. It's what I made this video for, but it did grow and change through the research process. While I think inertia action is cool, the following is the one that I'm going to actually push for us to put in the mainstream. Bonfires. Out of everything in Dark Souls, the bonfires are what Miyazaki himself was the most excited about. He designed them to be a place of warmth and solitude. A place to prep for your next big adventure and roast some marshmallows on the side. They're the most praised mechanic from the games, with entire articles dedicated to just them. The bonfires are the standout thing in the Souls games, and they're present in nearly every game that people label as Souls-like. The bonfire system, however, does not work alone. In fact, it's inherently tied with something completely different. If we take the bonfire, which respawns enemies, saves the game, heals the player to some degree, and optionally is a hub for the player in some way, and combine it with the death mechanic, aka corpse running, where you drop your experience and or currency when you die and you have to go collect it or it's gone forever, you get a unique situation focused around player choice. Are you going to journey back and risk losing everything to the same enemies on a similar path, like a loser lame gamer, or will you abandon them like a spitter, causing you to lose out on things that could make the next challenge easier? This is the entirety of Dark Souls in a nutshell. You repeatedly die and return to the same fight over and over until you get good and succeed. Most of the YouTubers and articles I read while researching this video mentioned these two systems to some degree, but only one nailed it the hardest and made me fully realize what this video would be. The Escapists tried to rename the Souls-like, and while I disagreed with most of the video and the podcast that followed, Yahtzee suggested almost exactly what I just said, and he gave it a name that was better than anything I came up with. From now on, instead of the term Souls-like, we will be calling this genre recursive. It's a mathematics, I know, gross, and computer engineering term that basically means an action will be repeated for successive results. You're repeating the action of fighting the thing that killed you over and over until you succeed. You're taking the same path over and over to collect your souls until you escape or defeat them. You're bashing your face into a boss over and over until it dies. Even from a story standpoint, Dark Souls is about a repeating cycle that is never ending until you choose to end it, and that is echoed in the gameplay. So what does the term recursive mean for every game that people claim is a Souls-like? If the game doesn't have some equivalent to a checkpoint that respawns enemies in corpse run, it isn't recursive and shouldn't have been called a Souls-like in the first place. This is an example of a game that's trying to mimic the vibe while ignoring the mechanics, and once again, genres are gameplay based. Since recursive is an adjective, it can be latched onto practically any game that doesn't have something else that cancels it out. Like, for example, I don't really see how a recursive roguelike could exist, since the existence of permadeath Kinda makes corpse running not possible without it becoming a roguelite. For the nerds who want specifics, here's the Berlin interpretation of the rough requirements for a game to be considered recursive. It's not as long as it is for other genres, as this is kind of an additive thing, not an entire descriptor of a game's systems. Again, it's an adjective. For example, Dark Souls and all of its siblings are recursive action-adventure RPGs. Same with Lies of P, Another Crab's Treasure, and many others. Remnant and its sequel could be recursive shooters. However, they don't have any corpse run-back mechanics. They do fill that void with many low-value requirements, but if we open the floodgates, how will we know when to stop so we don't drown? Hollow Knight is a recursive Metroidvania. So is Blasphemous and its sequel, and the Star Wars Jedi games, but in 3D. Code Vein is a recursive hack and slash, and Dark Souls 2 is still a pile of shit. Now you all have homework. I know, gross. But we have to make it stick. Next time you feel the need to reference a game that you would call Souls-like, call it recursive instead. If you're then asked, what does that even mean? Either explain the best you can, here's a default line for you, or link them to this video to pump my view count. I've been making pretty decent YouTube videos for quite a while now. I would love more attention for my effort, honestly. The end goal is to get people to start using recursive while either not knowing or forgetting where it came from. If every gaming YouTuber didn't mention Doom clones in every video, no one would remember the term existed. Would just call it FPS. Guilty, Your Honor. Eventually, the term Souls-like will fade out of existence and recursive will take its place. If you want extra credit, you can use inertia action too, but I feel like I need to workshop that one a little bit more before we dedicate to the inertia lifestyle. Stay tuned. I have been skipping over something both genre-defining and overlooked that Dark Souls founded this whole time though. Simply because I already talked about it in this video right here. Fashion Souls. It's an incredibly important mechanic to the game that drastically changes the experience. So I hope that this also gets mimicked more often. So click right there to continue this video, because it's just as important. Thank you for watching. I love you. Mwah!